Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Tonight our guest is James Barth, the Tennessee Director for Restore Liberty. But first it's time for announcements and updates. The Stewart County GOP will hold a first ever Founders Day event on Saturday, September 30th from 11 to 1:30. Our keynote speaker will be Lieutenant Colonel retired Dewey Browder, a Vietnam veteran and emeritus professor at APSU, where he was also a member of the inaugural class of the APSU Military Hall of Fame. His speech is titled America's Founding Principles. Also, as a door prize, you will have the opportunity to win 800 pounds of Wagyu beef on the hoof donated by a local cattleman. Transport and processing are the winner's responsibility. Tickets are $20 per plate or $35 per couple. Text 931-237-1026 or 931-614-8437 for more information. Music will be provided by the Cumberland Winds. If you want our state to step up and push back on our overreaching, often unconstitutional federal government, visit tncss@weebly.com and learn more about the nullification legislation we hope to get passed this session. There's no cost, it's an informational site, but we'd like for you to click on the Substack tab to sign up. We need as many as we can to get a show of support for this effort. For good conservative talk radio, tune in to 105.3 WDXE Radio in Lawrenceburg from 5 to 6 p.m. on Mondays for the Kip Capley Show and Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. for the local GOP radio show hosted by Chair of the Lawrence County GOP, Brandon Taylor, and Lawrence Sutton, the Secretary of the Lawrence County GOP. If you have an announcement from a conservative organization you want announced on this show, send the information to tninformer.tv@gmail.com the Friday before the show. Now to our guest, Jim Barth, the Tennessee Director of Restore Liberty. Jim is a 20-year veteran of the Army National Guard in Georgia and lived in Wyoming before moving to Tennessee in 2022. He is a student of the Constitution and very passionate about upholding it. He lives in Erin, Tennessee with his wife and his daughter. Jim, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Dave, it's my pleasure, my honor. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. Well, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
All right. Prior to moving, I got to give a little bit of headway here because background. Prior to me moving to Tennessee, I was running for sheriff in Laramie County, Wyoming, and when I started running as a constitutional conservative, my campaign was, as a constitutionalist, always placing God first. Caught the attention of Restore Liberty, and they approached me and asked me if I would like to consider endorsement from them. And this is how it started with my path with Restore Liberty. So upon arriving in Tennessee, they asked me within a short amount of time if I wanted to take up the lead in Tennessee and be the state director for Restore Liberty and be able to run it forward, to be able to instill and talk those principles and talk with people about the principles that Restore Liberty is all about. So that in itself, it's been a great honor to do so, and I've met a lot of great people across the state, and it's been a whirlwind, if you will, to be able to go from place to place, to be able to speak to all these different people, and be part of what's happening here in Tennessee.
So, Restore Liberty. Now, who started the organization?
Okay, it was started by two gentlemen originally. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, and he's out of Montana, and then retired General Blaine Holt. They started it off, with having a strong veteran involvement, because as veterans, we take that oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, but that oath doesn't end with the end of your service. So they wanted to be able to take it forward because Darren Gobb and General Holt, I have a hard time calling him by first name, but they wanted to run that forward. So it was quite an endeavor to run it.
So how many states are they in?
Right now, we're in a majority of the states. We're still short, from what I can remember, from just last looking at it. 8 states we need directors, but we have involvement in every state. We just need directors within those 8 states to be able to take it to the level like what I'm doing, to be able to involve everybody. So right now we're again short about 8 states for directors.
Okay. Well, so what exactly does your organization do to restore liberty?
Hey, that's a great question. So um, a large portion of what we do is we're out here to educate the public and also our elected representatives about the original intent of the role for America, and what that involves with the role of the Constitution of the United States and the philosophy of all natural rights, but also to enable states to utilize their sovereignty, because a lot of people do not understand that each state is a sovereign state. But then the sovereignty is also guaranteed to each state or all these individuals in the Constitution, specifically in the Ninth and Tenth Amendments. Um, Upon that, as we're going out there to educate people and legislators, we then seek out the individuals that are willing to represent those principles, to be able to educate and hold true also those principles for office. And then we hold, as a group, we hold those representatives responsible. So if they're going to say they're going to uphold the Constitution and be for the people, we make sure that we hold their truth, if you will, to the fire, and making sure that they also don't exceed that authority for failing to represent their constituents. Which, lately we've seen a whole lot of that for the violations of the Constitution. So I can, if you like, I can go a little bit further into part of our education process, if you like.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
All right. So when people are actually, they don't, a lot of people don't understand that each state is a sovereign state. And as such, in simple terms, it's more like a contract that each state has with the federal government. That's where the term united comes from. The Constitution is defined and it's limited, as you know, but it it kind of has taken a switch in about, I'd say, the last 25, 30 years, where Hollywood, of all things, has actually taken that to show that, well, the feds are the supreme um, entity. They play on that word, supreme law of the land. And so when they do so, they've played out this picture in people's heads that, oh, if the FBI comes crashing down into your state, well, they've got the supreme authority. And that's not the case in most cases, because they have to, go through your sheriff. More on that in just a minute, though. But specifically, we try to talk to people on holding them or educating them to the Ninth and Tenth Amendments. The Ninth Amendment was, of course, Madison's attempt to ensure that the Bill of Rights was not seen as granting to the people of the United States only specific rights that it addressed. But in recent years, some have interpreted it as to affirming the existence of such enumerated rights that are expressly protected by the Bill of Rights. Whereas if you look at the Ninth Amendment, it says basically the enumeration in the Constitution or certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. People really are starting to grasp onto this now, but where when you say inalienable rights, or you're born with these rights, and it's, it doesn't matter your ethnic background, or you're born with these rights. It's not granted by men. It's God-given, in other words. Whereas then we go through and start talking about the 10th Amendment, where we've seen recently, there's a big movement in the United States, I'll back up on that actually plays very hard on the 10th Amendment. It's called your sheriffs. And the sheriffs, being your chief law enforcement of his or her county, is the highest law enforcement official in that county. They're there to protect your people. And because the 10th Amendment exists in such a place to define the concept of federalism, basically the relationship between federal and state governments, federal activity has unfortunately increased. So too that the problem of reconciling state and national interest as they apply to federal powers, to tax, to the police, to the regulations such as wage and hour laws. Also, disclosure of personal information, where they're kind of throwing that out there. But also the power, where the 10th Amendment states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So that actually throws really hard into the sovereignty, to where what's not defined in the United States Constitution is yours to keep.
Right.
And this is where the people kind of get it wrong, is yes, it's up to the states to define. However, it cannot be in violation of the supreme laws, which is the Constitution of the United States.
Right. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that the federal government was a creation of the states, not the other way around. And the Ninth and the 10th are just reminders of that. But I think people overlook them a lot. And we have to use them. They're not self-enacting. They're words. It takes the people to step up for them. And, educating the public on the Ninth and 10th Amendment and, like you say, sovereignty. We retained all the sovereignty that we did not specifically grant to the federal government, which was a creation of the states. If we didn't give it to them in the enumerated powers, basically Article 1, Section 8, if it's not there, then it remains with the state. And educating the public on that, and unfortunately having to educate most of our elected officials, is something that definitely needs to be done, and it's very important. And I'm glad that you guys are working on that, because that, in my opinion, is the only way to fix our country.
Well, that's absolutely true, because what our education system has done in this country has failed us as a whole. Because when I went to high school to graduate, it was mandatory that you had to complete a civics class.
Yep.
Before you could graduate, you had to complete that class. And sadly, it was the late 80s and early 90s where they started pulling out the civics class to where it doesn't exist now. And people largely forget it. The Constitution, with the Declaration of Independence, is just a little bit over 3,000 total words within the Declaration and the Constitution. It's not a very lengthy document, but it needs to be read.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody were to join Restore Liberty, what should they expect if they join your organization? What are they going to be expected? What should they expect to be asked to do?
Okay. That's a good question. So part of what we do is we ask them to go to our website at restoreliberty.org, and you can go in and take a look. There's two parts of it. There's a declaration of consent, and then there's also another form that we ask them to read and look over. It's called constitutional consent. As part of that, and I need to give a little background, people are like, well, what is constitutional consent? That's actually a piece of the Declaration of Independence, where it states that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them that shall seem likely to affect their safety and their happiness. What does that mean? Well, it's more, we could really go into a long discussion on that, but the short version of that is the people are in charge, and that the elected officials, they're there to represent our wishes. It's not the other way around. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of the other way around, which I'll even be as bold to say at this past special session, was all brought about because we have a governor that decides that it's all about him. So what we ask, as far as, if you wanted to donate to the organization, that to join up, if somebody wanted to give $5 a month or more, it absolutely helps us out to be able to take it out and spread the word. So what that means is to be involved within your community, to run for a local office such as the mayor or city mayor, county mayor, county commission, to also run for the school boards, but not only just run for the school boards if you don't want to run for it, to hold them accountable, to make sure that they're doing their job that you elected them to do. Talk to and educate your commissioners, as I was just alluding to, other school boards and also city councils. Then there's things that we can all do, like to work to battle the issues in the school, whether it be from these, and I'll just be nice about it, the inappropriate books in the school to some of the issues that we've been seeing with security, if you will.
Right.
Speak up and help and rally within your community, getting involved with your neighbors, with all the churches, which in my opinion, and I've seen a lot more lately, the church needs to get more involved with this politically, because largely a lot of churches have failed us in that. And it goes back in the Revolutionary War, if you will, the Black Robed Regiment. They were part of the same type of people that were involved in their community. But the Black Robed Regiment, the crown put a price on their head. Because they were involved with getting their community educated and rallying them together against the crown. So same thing here to get the churches involved as well. Be involved with voter registration drive, help out with that. Serve as a poll watcher, workers and or election, your elected judges. But all that has to come about from twofold, where I can come into different places throughout Tennessee to talk with people and educate them on the Constitution, get them started on it, hand them a free Constitution, and then we can talk about it and then get them involved, and then I can be a resource for them to help them leverage their communities to be able to talk on these issues that I mentioned above.
So obviously, donations are always needed, but the main focus is learning the Constitution, learning the founding documents, and then being able to relate that to the other people in your community and your elected officials, and basically being involved with all the levels of government that you have access to. That's in a gist what your organization tries to do, correct?
Exactly. We're trying to make sure that people that stand for conservative values, that the same principles that were put forth through the Constitution are there to be able to help enforce that, to be involved. Because Lord knows the left is very involved and they're not for the Constitution.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and unfortunately they've taken over most of the institutions in our country.
Yes.
You mentioned endorsements earlier. So what is the exact process for endorsements by your organization?
That is a great question, and it's a very tough process to go through, because we seek out individuals that are making a difference when they're in their community. Now, we want to make sure that, okay, just because you've seen their voice, on the news or heard it within a writing, that it's just not a moment of passion for them, so to speak. So we start watching what they're doing within the public, and then doing research as to how they're voting or how they're working within either their county commission, school board, or representatives of the legislators. Look at their voting record. It's quite time consuming to dig through all that, to look at those records and basically make a determination. We don't make it on any kind of personality test, because as we know, not everybody has a personality, but we try to make sure that it's that you're doing what the Constitution would have us to do, not only for the United States, but I have to throw in there the Tennessee Constitution, which is part of educating people on that as well. So once we've filled out a very exhaustive background on checking these people out, start asking people in the community about their opinion or what they think of this person. That kind of helps to gauge it as well. But then once I've done all the background on it, we'll go through and have an interview or several interviews basically, with these representatives, these elected people, officials. So part of that interview process is asking about their knowledge on the Constitution. I'm not asking them to be a constitutional scholar, but we are looking for the relevance in their day-to-day life or the decision process. After we've determined all the check boxes on everything is in there to basically be, I know this becomes a bad word, but be the patriot that our country so sorely needs, to be that beacon, that shining hope. We then offer the endorsement through there and of course, place them on a national website. Tennessee right now, we're leading with those people, which, volunteer state. I think there's a special thing about Tennessee, but being able to get these people in, there are some good people. Sadly, not enough.
Yeah. Well, now, so let me ask you, are the endorsements just for elected officials?
There are two on there that are special endorsements because of their involvement within the state of Tennessee and holding the elected officials' feet to the fire, so to speak. One of which is Richard Archie from the Tennessee Firearms, and then John Harris as well. It's not an endorsement for the Tennessee Firearms by any means. It's because of their involvement and their activity with holding these officials' feet to the fire. Mr. Archie, God love him. He's a powerhouse. He has no problem chasing down a legislator to be able to talk with them and school them on the Constitution, since that's what we're all about. Yeah. That's why he's in there. Same for John Harris. Strong stalwart for holding the Constitution to be the deciding factor as far as their oath of office. That oath that they took an oath on the Constitution. So that's why those two are in there as a special. It's the only two special ones, too, by the way, out of the whole United States. They hold a very strong place within there as a non-elected official.
Wow, that's quite an honor to be only two out of the whole country.
It is.
So, who else has your organization endorsed in Tennessee?
Okay. So we have endorsed Chris Morris. He's the SEC committeeman for Senate District 28. We've endorsed Jay Reedy, representative for House District 74. Yep. Ryan Ritchie, representative again for House District 20. Senator Janice Bowling, Senate District 16. Representative Todd Warner, State Representative District 92. Monty Fritz, he's been on your show before, State Representative District 32. State Senator Joey Hensley from District 28. Kip Capley, as you mentioned at the opening has a radio show, but he's an outstanding representative as well, and I believe is the youngest serving one as well, District 71.
He's a very good freshman.
Yes, I'm blown away by him. There's not many 26-year-olds that are in his shoes.
No, absolutely. I've heard him talk, and he is squared away. I hope he's around in the office for a long time.
Yes, and we have a couple more. We have Representative Susan Lynn, District 75, Representative Bud Halsey, District 12.
Yep. And
we're in talks with a couple others right now, but it's just we're really trying to concentrate also on sheriffs and judges, and I'm in talks, trying to have the beginning talks of a sheriff from Lawrence County, but sheriffs are kind of a rare breed where they really don't want the spotlight, so to speak. But
right.
They're sadly enough throughout the state of Tennessee, from what I'm finding, there's not a whole lot of constitutional sheriffs.
You might want to try Guy Buck in McNairy County, and I think the sheriff in Putnam County is a constitutional sheriff involved with Sheriff Mack's organization.
Absolutely, and they're on the list. It's just a matter of trying to get the bandwidth on their end to be able to take some time to be able to speak with me, because it's a little bit of a process.
Right.
And yeah. But yeah, you're right. Those ones are. But sadly, out of all the counties out of Tennessee, you really want your sheriff to be a constitutional sheriff. You really do.
Absolutely.
Because when the feds decide that they're going to drop the ball, so to speak, and be able to come in here, that sheriff, like as I was willing to do back in Laramie County, are there to pledge their life to make sure that your safety and your security under the Constitution are upheld at all costs. And that sheriff has a unique position because they have to serve both sides, whether it's Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. So it's a very important role a very key role, but one that the feds absolutely have tried to stomp on.
Right.
So out of the United States, you have like I think it's 3,086 sheriffs, and out of that, you have 1,044 which are registered as constitutional sheriffs.
Right, that's pretty sad. It should be all of them, or at least the majority of them. And sheriffs are they're the highest constitutional officer in your county. A lot of them don't realize that, or they don't want to step up, and they defer the feds way too much. I mean, and that's something that has to be fixed. We had that situation here recently in, I think it was Chester County, where this disabled veteran, we don't know all the details because we haven't really been told anything. But all we know is the FBI showed up and the guy was killed. So, I don't know what he did. I don't know why they were there, but apparently the sheriff in that county didn't know anything about it till after the fact. So there's definitely a problem there. And it's really, our state legislature, to me, that's something they should call a special session for, or at least have a caucus meeting for Republicans. I don't expect the Democrats to do anything. But the Republicans should have a caucus meeting. The governor has made no comments about that. That should be an issue when the federal government comes in and kills one of your citizens and you don't know and didn't know that they were coming in. That's a problem. That is a definite problem.
That's right. And the real sad part about it is, let's say the guy did some heinous crime. Well, under our Constitution, you have the right to a trial.
Right.
And you have the ability to a speedy trial at that. But when you look at on the top, that looks like a disabled veteran was shot and didn't have weapons. And then I seen a report that came out lately where, it's a little bit of information that came out that says, well, the guy was well armed. Really? Says who? It's the guy's dead. The guy's passed now. And anything can be said. Right. Because he didn't have his day in court. And sadly, the FBI is required to notify the sheriff when they come into his or her county to be able to go in and deliver a warrant to kick in a door, whatever the case is.
Right.
That way, the sheriff makes sure your constitutional rights are upheld, and they violated every bit of it. And then people wonder why people like you and me are out there educating people on the Constitution, is so we can make them aware that this is totally wrong.
Absolutely. So it's a pretty extensive process to endorse somebody. Have you removed any endorsements? And if so, what's the process for that?
All right. Yes. Sadly, we had to reduce, to remove an endorsement. And I'll say this for the record. It's not something that I enjoy or even like to do because, first of all, I take it kind of hard because you go through this process, submit it up to the people through my chain, and they look at it, they say, yeah, good job, let's do this. So to have to even think about removing an endorsement is something that I take very personal. So yes, we had to remove an endorsement. Am I allowed to say who it is? Because people can look at the website. Okay. We had to remove the endorsement. And what happened was this individual ended up having worked against fellow legislators, where I'll just say this, your word is your bond. And if you give your word that you're going to do something to work with somebody on a bill, your word is your bond, and is basically the best guarantee of an agreement that you can have. If someone had issues with that bill, talk about it before it goes to the floor. Don't make it a point to slam your fellow people publicly and then take it to the next step further, embolden the left, because I'll say this much. That person that lost his endorsement really emboldened Justin Jones and the gallery that day by working against the people. So once all that came in, I sat back and thought, let this cool off a little bit. Do the Lincoln letter thing. Just kind of think on this for a bit. And I did. But then you start getting calls from people across the state and even, the people that I report to that this isn't a good thing. And it does not represent our values. So all that being said, it's a very, very tough endorsement to obtain because of the high standards we meet, but it's also very easy to lose if one decides to work against the people or to work against the others that are working to stand for the Constitution, freedoms and the freedoms and conservatism. If, for example, again, if they give their word and they're not going to follow through, that's a huge violation in our book, and one that they don't take lightly. So the discussion was had amongst internally. We've contacted that person's office. That person decided that they didn't have the time to listen to us or talk with us. And so that was just another defining measure of, okay, we're making the right decision to rescind it.
Any more detail you want to provide on that? I mean, some people may know about the situation. I know it had to do with something that happened during the special session, had to do with the gun bill, had to do with the understanding of at least one legislator that this other legislator had told him he was going to support his bill, and then in committee not only didn't support it, but spoke out against it, and actually gave the other side a victory. Not a permanent victory, but it certainly shouldn't have been done. And this goes beyond the party issue. But if there are any other details that you're comfortable with, if you're not comfortable, you don't want to name names, that's your call. But feel free to fill in any details that you're willing and comfortable filling in.
All right. So the representative I'm speaking of is Scott Sapicki. Okay. Scott has had a phenomenal voting record in the past, but has come with afterwards, come to find out some baggage. And as such, we'll just move forward to the special session. That special session, where he, as you stated, gave a temporary win to the Justin Jones group and to we'll call them the commie mommies. But he took it to the next level to where it emboldened these people to actually come through on video, stated on the local stations in Nashville, where they are planning to come back to Nashville during our regular session in mass to try to help fight this, because it's obvious that we're going to try to run it through again. And Representative Todd is the one that sponsored the bill, and you had Kip Capley that was on it as well. He co-sponsored it, but it was a strong move against your own party, one that was supposed to stand for constitutional values, and it was a sleazy move. Let's put it that way. Yeah. If you've got some type of discrepancy against a fellow representative on the floor, don't punish the people for it. Have that discussion behind closed doors and act professional. And he didn't act professional. So that's about as far as I can go with it.
Okay. So basically, he didn't uphold a constitutional. He didn't uphold a proposed constitutional legislation, and he had already given his word that he was going to. And on top of that, he basically, the way he presented it, I mean, it was more than he just voted no. He had to pontificate on it in the committee, and that's kind of what gave the other side, something of a victory. Let's put it that way. And so those are the main issues with that. Do you remember the specifics? You want to talk about the specifics of the bill?
Right at the moment, it's eluding me. But I remember it was about I can give highlights on it. To be able to put a person into the schools that was a retired veteran or honorably discharged veteran or retired police officer that had an enhanced carry permit, to be able to help protect the school. And as such, that's not a bad thing at all. But then, see, he probably could have got away with not losing his endorsement, but he danced on the following. He got on the news and saying, well, that means anybody could have entered the school with an enhanced carry permit. And even the shooter that was in that school shooting, the woman that shot up, which, by the way, we haven't gotten the transcripts on, the manifesto. But he says, had she had an enhanced carry permit, she could have just walked in anyways. And that was not what the bill was about. The bill was about putting people that were retired military, retired law enforcement into the schools to be able to, with an enhanced carry, with some training, to be a school resource, if you will, a SRO of sorts. Because let's face it, law enforcement's spread pretty thin, and this would give them a great advantage. And you have a lot of vets that are just willing to help with their time. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell us about your organization, and specifically in your organization, and then maybe you could talk to us about some of the things you're doing in your community, because I know you're involved heavily with the school situation in Houston County.
Yes, sir. So the one thing that I would really like to encourage people to do is to get involved, whether it's with their local GOP party or with the election office, to really get involved, but also to start visiting your representatives, your county mayors, your city mayors, get a pulse for where they stand on things. But when, like these special sessions, for instance, when the special session was up and coming, it would have been key for people to be able to hold the governor to the feet to the fire, because yes, he does have a constitutional right to have that special session. However, it's worded in the Constitution for extraordinary circumstances. Nobody could define what those circumstances were. So if things come up in the community, to be able to speak with your representatives and legislators and let them know your feelings on it. And when I say that, do it respectfully. Don't go in there, cussing and swearing or nothing like that, but do it respectfully and have a good conversation and then be on your way. Until we can get more and more people to do this, it becomes a very hard thing for just a few people to be able to accomplish. But the more of us that get involved with this, the better off we are. If we have to look at how our founders were, the 3%ers is a very strong term to state that less than, or approximately 3% of our nation at the time were the ones that stood up against the crown. And when you look at that, you had much more that were either didn't want to get involved, kind of like we have now, or they were in alignment with the crown. So you had 3% were the ones that pulled off our nation during the Revolutionary War. We had a very bloody and confrontational war that a lot of people gave everything, those founders, so that we could have something. And I think they would be appalled right now if they could look back and say, look at what I've done. What did I do this for? Because so many people are more apathetic, I believe, or have been, and we need to get more involved. So a lot of that is being involved within your community. Reach out to us at restoreliberty.org. And if you have questions, we can help to answer those questions and help to get you involved, and even come and speak and help on that. So that's the first part. On the second part, what you said, involvement with the school board?
Yeah, I know you have an issue over there with some of the books, like probably every county in Tennessee, probably every county in every state in our country has an issue with the books that are being brought into our library. And so if you could just talk about that for your specific situation over there that you're comfortable with talking about, and that won't cause you any conflicts talking about.
Well, if I'm not causing conflict, I'm not doing the right thing. When I say that, it's conflict as far as adhering to the Constitution. So what we have here in Houston County is kind of a unique situation, because Houston County is one of the poorer counties within Tennessee. Tennessee has a very small populace, if you will. It's like less than 8,000 people. But the school board has been on a tyrannical overreach. I can comfortably say that. We first arrived here from Wyoming, decided to go to the school board and ask them, hey, are you teaching CRT or wit and wisdom, which is what it was named then? They're like, oh, no, we don't have any of that in our school. We don't know what you're talking about. Come to find out, they lied. It turns out it was a big lie, because it has been going on within the schools, and they can't say they didn't know about it because they voted on the curriculum. So we started getting involved because one of the, and I can't give the person's name because I don't have permission, but this parent asked us to get involved because of my involvement with Restore Liberty, and my wife has been involved with this back in Wyoming as well. Asked if we'd help her out and get involved with some of the books in the school. We started hearing about this back in Wyoming, whereas there's on a national list so far, there's over 144 different books that are inappropriate. Now, don't hear me say that I'm a book burner. That's not what this is about. We're talking about material that does not belong in the school system, such as very sexually explicit material, and shows pictures and graphics of the workings of such and the verbiage of such and how to, basically it's very strong, but it goes as far as how to transition from a male to a female, all this type of nonsense. And all this is done through the protection to where they don't have to tell the parents. They don't have to involve them. So it's like, yeah, I'll get involved. I'll help you out. So I started approaching the school board and said, I want to see the list of books that you actually have within your libraries. They first said, well, you're not a parent. You have no right to demand anything. But see, Tennessee law shows that if I request a FOIA, they have to give it. Well, she wanted to fight me on it, and I said, okay, here's the deal. If I don't have a right as a taxpayer, she said, you don't. I said, okay, let's sit down with the accountant for the county and let's figure out just how many dollars that we're paying in for taxes to the school, and I want a refund.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And she laughed and says, it doesn't work that way. I says, your argument doesn't work that way either. So the way that this works is because they started putting up a list of rules, that guidelines, that if you want to speak at a school board meeting, you have to submit in writing in full detail what you want to talk about 2 business days ahead of time. And then if it's approved, you're going to be allowed to speak. And if not, they'll contact you. Otherwise, you'll be on the docket. But the guidelines are you can't talk about any of the policies that are in the school. You can't talk about what teachers are doing. You can't talk about what the school board's doing. You can't talk about anything that's part of the curriculum within the school. It's like, so why am I talking? And if
What would you talk about then if you couldn't talk about any of that?
And then you turn around and at the bottom, they've got this nice fancy, you could tell they had an attorney that absolutely is clueless, wrote, these meetings are business meetings and they're not public meetings, but they're meetings held in public. I was like, okay, now it's on. Let's play. So they also put at the bottom of this letter that if anybody's in violation of this, the guidelines that I stated above that you can't speak about, they will warn you to stop. And if you still continue, they will have you removed by law enforcement and cited under Tennessee Code 39-17-306. Well, this turned out to be quite funny when I brought it up to several representatives, some of which I mentioned that we endorse, and 2 state senators where they said, that's the riot section of Tennessee Code. How does that apply? I said, yeah. They said, so it's obvious, had the same interpretation I did. They're trying to shut down free speech. So I advise them that you may not want to go that route because it's a violation of free speech, and I will speak when the time is appropriate. Now, do I believe that anybody should be able to come in and speak, 45 minutes to an hour? No. There has to be some simple guidelines, 3 to 5 minutes. But if you have nobody else speaking, what's wrong with letting if this one person talk for, say, 10 minutes, if they have material that's pertinent to what's going on in our schools? So they have kind of we'll call it a straw man argument, because they're trying to limit the free speech in a poor county because these people do not have the money, they think, in order to fight it. However, I've been saying since I got here, and I warned this school administrator, if you should have me removed, I will come after your surety bond, the police officer's surety bond, because he's having me remove me and not knowing the Constitution, my First Amendment right. And if it was the sheriff's office, I will go after the sheriff's surety bond. And if it's the police chief's surety bond, the police chief, I'll go after his. At that point, the sheriff goes, I'm not touching that. I'm not doing it. And so same with the police chief. It's like, as long as you're not throwing furniture and all this other stuff, you will have your freedom of speech. So,
Can you explain the surety bond a little bit? Some of the listeners might not understand the surety bond issue.
okay, every elected official, whether it's school board, uh, uh, school board officials, elected officials, the administrator of schools, sheriffs, police, county mayor, city mayors, has a surety bond. A surety bond is a bond just like you would have if, I don't know, like if you're delivering money for Brinks. It's kind of a background that's been run on you, to make sure that you're not a felon and serving the office, and that you're of good character. Along with that surety bond comes um, an insurance underwriter, that actually insures that. So, for example, they have a surety bond that allows them to be in office. Without a surety bond, they can't be in that position. And here's how this works. If you have a school administrator, like our school administrator we have here in Houston County, that decides they want to squash First Amendment rights, you have a right to send to them in certified mail. First, you start with regular mail, but then it ends up in certified mail if they refuse to answer. Um, you tell them that I want a copy of your surety bond and the insurance carrier. You also send a copy of that to the county mayor, so that it actually, if the school administrator doesn't do it, then the county mayor will, because if they have a county attorney that's worth their salt, they will understand that under this request, it's law that they have to. It eludes me as to which Tennessee statute. Forgive me. There is a Tennessee statute that covers the surety bond. I can get back with you. Forgive me on that. But that all elected officials have to have that, and upon request, they have to provide that. So where this actually works is, let's say, said school administrator is squashing persons or people's right to speak. And if you have 10 people come up and each file for a violation of the First Amendment rights, and each one of them will file for $100,000 against that surety bond insurance because of a violation of your First Amendment, you would, in effect, with those 10 people, exhaust that bond. Meaning that school official, police chief, whatever, for violating your rights, can no longer operate in that elected office. It does a whole lot more harm to them than suing the city or the school, where if you sue the city or school, it gets placed off long term. The insurance companies, in an effort to make sure that they don't want to pay this, they get with the school attorney, for example, in this, and says, you better let that person speak if you know what you're doing. Otherwise, you won't be able to serve. That's how using the surety bond to make sure that your voice is not squashed, but you also can tell them ahead of time, if you follow down this road, I'm going to file against your surety bond. And if they're smart about it, they'll let you speak.
Wow, that's something it sounds like we need to do. Yeah, it's actually, definitely a good secret weapon
It is.
that we need to make widely known, and it needs to be widely used. I mean, there's so many different ways I can think of that we could use that, and especially in regards to our schools right now. Our schools are out of control, all the garbage that's being pushed on our kids. And I blame the state. I know there's some good people in the state that are trying to stop this, but the bottom line is, if the people in power in the state wanted this to stop, it would stop. If the people in the counties, the county school boards, the directors of schools, if they did not want this garbage in their district, it wouldn't be there. Now, I'm not saying that all of them do, but not enough of them are pushing back to make it happen. And so we're going to have to keep pushing back.
It's absolutely correct. And here's where it all stems from. Prior to National Education Associate, or basically until the federal funds had come through into the late 80s, schools operated on their own, basically through fundraisers and county taxes.
Right.
It was not a federal initiative. But the same measure is being taken on in Houston County, Tennessee, to Stewart County, to, if you will, going all the way back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, to Colorado. The same playbook is because the teachers union has educated these people. This is how you're going to go forward. And they violated so badly people's constitutional rights. No, and before we left Wyoming, there was a woman that spoke down in Longmont, Colorado, and she was speaking out against these books. And Terry and I were riding down I-25 and looked up at these billboards, and it shows these FBI billboards. It shows, do you know somebody speaking out at the school board? Report them to the FBI. This was on the I-25 billboards going from
Good Lord.
Cheyenne to Denver. So, anyways, this woman spoke out at the school board meeting respectfully, nothing bad. She wasn't throwing furniture, wasn't yelling, wasn't cussing. A couple days later, she's woken up to the FBI dragging her in her morning clothing, if you will, out to the yard at gunpoint and dragging her disabled daughter down the stairs by her hoodie. Now, if speaking out at a school board is somehow listing you as a felon stronger than Hunter Biden, something's wrong. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just disgraceful that those kind of things go on, and that the federal government has weaponized, the DOJ has weaponized federal law enforcement against citizens, against mom and dads just speaking up for their kids at school board meetings and other situations like that. So, when are you expecting the situation there in Houston County to be resolved, or when's the next timeline there in Houston County that we could expect to see something?
Glad you asked. This coming up Wednesday, week Wednesday, I'm going to give it a week. If I hear nothing, what's going to happen is then the certified letter gets sent. Once the certified letter gets sent, then it's on, because, and I wish I could grab my phone right now and tell you which Tennessee code that I would send it based on that format, citing the Tennessee code. And at that point there, by the certified letter, they have no choice but to answer. It's the law. And to be honest, I don't expect them to respond to my email, although they probably should if they know what's good for them. But once I send out a certified letter, then it becomes a matter of legal. And the beautiful thing about surety bonds is you don't have to go to court to file against their surety bond. You file directly with the bond company. So it can do a lot of damage. And am I wanting to do that? No. But do I think I need to for the benefit of our nation's children? Yes. Absolutely.
What's the financial cost to you in this process?
About $1.25 for the registered mail.
Sounds like a bargain.
Yep, it is. And so one thing I wanted to close, or just kind of actually speak about, is doing the right thing is very difficult. Speaking out against these tyrannical politicians is always going to be a very difficult thing. A lot of people say, well, man, I just couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. But you really can do it, because if you look, our nation is in dire straits right now. And I encourage everybody to start getting involved in little bits. And the more you open up and pull back the curtain, so to speak, the more you can't look the other way. And once you get to a certain point, then you realize you're emboldened, and you've got to be able to, get with your other people. That's part of what we're trying to develop with Restore Liberty, to get people to band together to be part of a bigger movement, be educated, pull these people together. Once you do that, the pain is much less. I'll be honest. First time somebody has to speak at a school board meeting or county commission meeting, it's painful, because you're going to have the people that are going to be, you're seeing them on the news. They're going to speak out against you. They're going to say nasty things about you. But do you really care? Because if you're doing the right thing and standing for what God, the truth that God put you here to speak, and speaking to defend our Constitution that our founding fathers put into place and bled for, that our veterans bled for, then it becomes more of a very strong, noble task to take on, just as strong as breathing, if you will. So many people have got to start getting out of this whole thing of, and don't hear me say there's something wrong with this, but they would much rather get involved with taking their child to soccer practice than they will about standing for their child in the issues that we see and just one issue for the schools,
Yeah.
or standing against Bill Lee. We had a small success here, but unless we stay on things, that success won't be long lived.
Well, so many people you hear them talk about their kids and how much they care about their kids, and their kids are everything. But I don't know why more parents and even grandparents aren't involved pushing back on the garbage in our schools. I mean, there are some, obviously, and I think there's more than there was. But you would think that the kind of garbage that's going on, that the number of people would just be astronomical that we're saying, no, not here, we're not putting up with it, you better fix it. But, for all the people that claim to care so much about their kids and grandkids, I don't see a whole lot of action to back up that claim. I'm not saying they don't care, but I don't see why they're not involved in this issue. I mean, if some stranger on the street were giving this stuff to their kids, they'd be all over it. But because it comes from the school, they just don't want to get involved, and I don't understand that.
Well, part of what I've been seeing here, especially with some of these poor counties, Houston County just being one of them, there's a lot of people related in these counties.
Yep.
And they don't want to speak out against a family member, even though they don't agree with what's going on.
Yep.
But then couple that with, oh, you got a family member that works in the school district, that I can't destroy their job. But it's not a matter of destroying a job, because if they're doing their job, doing that they're supposed to be, this shouldn't be, in fear of. And if you got a family member that's going to be ticked off because you stood for your children, well, then do you really need to talk to that family member?
Yeah.
Because if that family member is going to be opposed to you standing up for our children, the future of our nation, the future of our military, I mean, everything that involves our nations, our children. And if you're bringing them up to be the wrong mindset, then it's totally, it's reverse of the way it should be. Hitler did the same thing with the Hitler Youth, right? Basically turning the children into his little minions, which in turn turn their own families in. And this is kind of like re-educating children to eventually be after their own parents, because part of these policies are not to talk to your parents about it. You don't have to tell them. Well, that's wrong in itself. But then to give children this type of material is wrong too, because their mind is developing, and it's been proven by many people that are doctors within this that state that their pathways are restructured, because it almost becomes a type of an addiction. Mm-hmm. And as that addiction, the endorphins kick in, and they want more of this. And same that they found with people that watch porn all the time. These pathways get redone, and it becomes a bigger and bigger high. I mean, we put restrictions on alcohol and tobacco and military age on the children. Shouldn't we do the same for the sexual material they read? And if the parent is so bent on saying, I want my kid to see it, well, then buy it for your child and do it in your house. Yeah. But don't subject every child to it just because you want it.
Yeah. Well, that would still be child abuse, and they should still pay the price. But yeah, I got you. It should not be in the public schools. Is there anything else you want to say about your organization?
Just that I encourage everybody to please go to the website, restoreliberty.org. Take a look at our website. Take a look at what we're about. Be able to sign a declaration of oath. Just basically, it's a restoration of your declaration to support the Constitution of the United States. Be able to be on board with us, because the more that we have, the stronger we are. Educate yourself, but then there's also some training material that you can look at on there as well. A lot of it's free, Patriot Academy, etc. There's Constitution courses. You can sign up for them and take them. If you can at all, and I'm not advocating to try to push people, because it's very tight economically. But if somebody can afford $5 a month, that goes a long ways for us to be able to continue the website, be able to continue on board, and then watch out for the you'll see on different newscasts. You'll see Darren Gobb and General Holt on Newsmax, OAN, sometimes Fox News. other news agencies as well, where they're being interviewed more and more. You can look them up on YouTube, and you can see them, and you can see all the interviews that they've done. And then lastly, read your Constitution and know it. Keep a copy in your back pocket. If you need a copy, contact me through Restore Liberty. I'll get it to you. Because the key is education again and knowing it. And finally, in closing, remember, we the people, as you can see behind me, meant something to our founders, that we are the ones that are in charge. We have a freedom and set of freedoms that must exist for our union to exist. If we let that go, we're done as a nation, we're done as a people. So God bless America.
Well, Jim, thanks for coming on the show. Enjoyed it. Hope to have you back. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the show and subscribe as well. Join us next week when our guest will be author, speaker, and constitutionalist Joe Wolverton. Thank you. That's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.